Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة
My name's Abdullah. I'm from University of Bristol, actually. And so we had a scenario we have a scenario at our university at the moment. Basically, one of the professors, um, he teaches humanitarian studies, I think, or is it human rights or something? And he teach his content regarding Islam is quite Islamophobic, and he teaches a lot of misconceptions about Islam, and it's been ongoing for some time. And I just wanted to ask, what advice would you give to the Islamic society here um, on how to deal with that? Thank you.
It's an issue that it's not just him. I've been around town and different universities here in London, and there's a few things you can do. I mean, what we did was we lodged a complaint. We went through the entire procedural, like the internal university complaint. But to be honest, I think something which would be more damaging and humiliating is if someone just records him and puts it on YouTube or something like that, and exposes his behavior to the mass audiences. If someone does that, I think it would be more humiliating in the long run. But maybe a combination of different things like that. For example, trying the appeals procedure or the complaints procedure inside the university. And I'm sure there's lots of recording devices now. Just let him continue talking until he makes a huge blunder, and then maybe at the end of term, surprise him with compilation of his things on YouTube with a nice good title, a spicy title. Even if you have small channel, it would still get traction, I believe. Like, university professor makes blunders on Islam or something like this. You can think of some title. So yeah, maybe expose him and complain about him. This is why a mixture of different things you can do there.
I like that idea. Thank you very much. We were going to run a campaign and advertise it on social media and everything. But I
No,
believe
don't do that yet. Get
okay.
some information. Get him to get the golden bullet. And the golden bullet is not him necessarily saying things which many academics, because academics in this country are very much protected. They have the right to say what they want, especially if they've been in the post that they have been for a certain amount of years. So most of the time, the complaints procedures will not be very successful. You will not be successful with it for the most part.
So are you saying?
The public thing is going to be more. It's a quick win, and it's more damaging, and it's more humiliating. Because then you put his full name in the title of the video, and you just put it all over social media and put it all over the internet. And when people type his name in, they are going to see him making mistakes about it. And this is what you want. You want to show incompetence, because an academic is not afraid to have a maverick opinion, but an academic is ashamed to make mistakes on his field of expertise. So when you find that the academic makes certain mistakes, which are blunders, huge blunders, then I think you can use those, say, to run the campaign. And maybe if you, we can help you with this campaign.
I'd be much interested in that. So you're saying that basically the video proof would be much more effective.
I think so. The complaints the internal complaints procedure is unlikely to get any traction, because once again, it's his opinion, and he's an academic. He's allowed to have those opinions under freedom of speech laws. But if he's making mistakes, historical, theological, philosophical mistakes on his supposed field of expertise, this will be a stain on his reputation, which is going to be much harder to recover from.
I see. So when you say when you're talking about restrictions on freedom of expression, how far does this extend in university?
Well, hugely. You'll be very surprised. Especially with these things. These people are protected. I mean, the university, I'm not sure about the University of Bristol, but certainly most universities in the UK have an internals complaint procedure. The thing is, here's what you shouldn't do. Although maybe these are some things you should do. Number one is don't reveal your cards in the class, especially if he's going to be marking any of your work. And especially even if you think that there is anonymity, because when you put your coursework and your exam, whatever, you're going to have like a candidate number, and in your mind you have this false illusion, which is actually false, that they don't know who you are. If they wanted to know who you are, they will find out who you are. Put it that way. And if they have something against you, they will put your grade down intentionally, you know, on purpose, just because they can, and it's just a show of power for them. It's the only power they have, actually. This and the few peer-reviewed journals that they have, that they put up on ResearchGate and other journals that maybe only a handful of people will read. So that some of them get really excited with the power, especially over students. You have to be careful. Don't show your cards. You have to try and pretend, But if there's some kind of damage limitation, for instance, if there's Muslims in the class or people that are interested in Islam, that he's also kind of corrupting the minds of, then what you don't want to do is you want to avoid challenging him in public. You want to get those particular Muslims or those people that would be interested in Islam and speak to them in other places where he's not influential, because it's just like it's the setup of a classroom and the professor. He is always going to be the authority. He can shut down conversations. He can initiate them. It's just a disadvantageous structure. So you're going to have to get him out, or these students out of that particular environment. Take them to, if they're Muslims, say, I want to speak to you about something, blah, blah, blah. Or if they're not Muslim, but you think that they may be interested in Islam, or that they're sincere people, maybe once again, you'd want to do some damage limitation in a very clever and wise way. But don't show your cards to him, because if he's going to be marking your work, or if he knows people in the department, he can easily get you to fail your exams, basically. It's as simple as that. He can get you to fail your courseworks. All of this stuff has happened. I've seen it happen, and to people. And the complaints procedure can only go so far. They do have a complaints procedure in most universities, but, don't think that the person whose coursework is going to go to, that they're neutral people that don't have WhatsApp connection with your friend over there that, hates Islam. So be careful, because there is corruption within the. Don't have too much trust in the system. Basically, is my advice. But then, at the same time, don't be taken as a fool. Don't show your cards. Basically, all the strategies of war. This is like life. You realize afterwards that the procedures that they have in place institutionally favors them, academics. Because they know they're going to be students like you. He knows he's going to ruffle your feathers. Do you not think he has protected his tracts? And do you not think he's thought about action, reaction, and what is the worst case scenario? This is what he does for a living. He gets about £80,000. He's paying his mortgage with this, and getting £80,000, 60,000 after tax. It's not a job he wants to lose, because academics, what else can they do really? They can't really do anything other than academia. Or they can be teachers in a secondary school. And you, being an academic in university, you get double the pay and half the time working. So they wouldn't want to do that. So these guys are not just going to throw away their careers like that. So he must have all of it figured out. So you can't show him your cards. You have to be clever. Don't trust the procedures too much. And try and do damage limitation in as much as you can.
And if I wanted to contact you further regarding this situation, would you be happy for me to?
Yeah, you can. I might not be able to get through to you, but if you can do this, we actually wanted to start a whole program, like exposing UK academics,
okay,
and teachers as well, that misinform their pupils and students about Islam. So if it's something which is systematic, then there will be a way for it. If not, then you can do it yourself. There's enough power there. I'm sure you can do it. You'll be surprised as to what you can achieve with your own social media accounts.
Thank you.
Welcome.
There are two questions in the chat.
Yeah, I can't see them. Where do I go to see the question? So does someone want to read them out so I can?
Yeah, I'll read them out if you want.
Okay.
One is from Muhammad. It says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Muhammad. If a person was to ask questions about evolution and Dawkins' proposal that everything comes from one evolving cell, what would be the best way to approach the question of evolution and that proposal of Dawkins?
So the person in our team that has been focusing on this the most is Sabur Ahmed, who's now doing his PhD on this. And I think his approach is probably the best that I've seen in the Muslim world, which is just to say that evolution, Darwinian evolution, is a working model which we accept as a working model. You know, just like any other working model, there's many working models. Now, theologically, we don't have issues with speciation or adaptation or any of those things. We have a direct problem with the evolution of Adam, or the first human being. We don't believe in the so-called out of Africa approach or the multi-regional hypothesis, so that we all came out of Africa or that we all evolved in different regions. I mean, we don't know what continent Adam was in, alayhi salam, but we do know that there's an entire narrative in the Quran about the first human being, that he was created directly by God, and that the progeny of that human being, the progeny is the human race. So this is what we believe. Now that runs counter to the fact that, you know, human beings, Homo sapiens, have evolved with a common ancestor with modern chimps and whatever. This runs counter to that point. But the fact of the matter is, this is one slither of the theory of evolution, which runs, or one slither of a Quranic account, which runs counter to the theory of evolution. Technically, you can believe in the evolution of animals, you can believe in all these things, but it's not necessary. I mean, and so what we will say is a working model, but it's not something which we necessarily wholeheartedly approve of. In the philosophy of science, we know the changing nature of evolutionary of theoretical models, whether they're biological or physics related. For instance, we have Newton's the paradigm shift between Newtonian physics into Einsteinian physics, or indeed even the paradigm shift from Ptolemaic models of the solar system to Copernican models in what was then referred to as the scientific revolution. There's nothing to guarantee us that there will not be another paradigm shift within biology, just as there was in physics, and continues to be different paradigm shifts within physics. For instance, now I know there is a website which you may want to visit. It's thirdwayevolution.com. I'm not sure if it's .com or .co.uk, but this is a website with esteemed biologists inside of it who make it candidly clear. I mean, we're talking about people like Dr. Dennis Noble of Oxford University. We're talking about Eugene Kuhn. We're talking about evolutionists or biologists from Japan and others. Like, it's a huge catalogue of different people, all of which say that the theory, this is what they say the theory of Darwinian evolution does not answer some questions that we have, and they are now questioning the entirety of the theory, and they have made it a point of clarity to mention in their homepage that we're not creationists. Most of them are atheists or irreligionists. You know, we're not creationists. We don't, we're not involved in that debate. We're just simply voicing another voice in the scientific community. Richard Dawkins attacked Dennis Noble on this, in fact. And Dennis Noble is a very, like, if you see him in interviews, he has a very calm temperament. So he's not the confrontational type. He's just interested in biology. The point of the matter is, this theory, although a working model, and most of it we don't have an issue with, this theory is one of many different working models in the philosophy of science, which can change. So, for instance, if you go now in the London Underground, there is a map. This is called the London Underground map. And this map works as a heuristic. In other words, it's not to scale. In other words, the distance between Oxford Circus and Marble Arch is not represented proportionately on that map. Yet you may use this map instrumentally to almost, a perfect level of instrumentality. In other words, if you go into Marble Arch Station and you come out in Oxford Circus, this map will help you or direct you, and it will get good results. Now, some people who make the argument that, well, the theory of Darwinian evolution, we use it to do all kinds of scientific things and even in medicine. Well, this is an argument from utility. Just as you use the London Underground map as a heuristic to get from place A to place B, you may use the theory of evolution in the same kind of way. Just because a theory is instrumentally true, it doesn't mean it's intrinsically so. So, for instance, Newtonian physics, you may still do calculations using the Newtonian framework, which may have a high degree of predictability, and which will explain the data in a very satisfactory way. That doesn't mean to say that there was no issues with Newtonian physics. I may even say the same thing about Ptolemaic geocentric models. Ptolemy was a Hellenistic physicist or astronomer who believed in the geocentric model, and he's got his whole theory of concentric circles and whatever. And they used this model to plan farming, etc. And they used it to good effect. This is why it was a shock to the scientific community in the 16th century when Copernicus and Galileo thereafter came with what they came with and crystallized what would then be known as the heliocentric model and initiated what is known in the history of science as the scientific revolution. So the issue is, you may have someone who is a skeptic atheist, and the nature of skepticism is that they have to question everything. I see no compatibility between skepticism and Darwinianism. I see no compatibility. If you are a true skeptic, you should look at the theory of Darwinian evolution, especially considering the fact that there have been so many paradigm shifts in the history of science. You should look at the theory of Darwinian evolution in at least an agnostic light, in at least an agnostic way. The fact that they are religiously affirming of the theory of Darwinian evolution, to me shows an inconsistency in paradigms. Moreover, there are many things in the theory of evolution, Darwinian evolution, though we've already stated don't go against our theological beliefs, are still extremely hard to believe when you think about them in the terms that they are described. So, for instance, David Berlinski, who wrote The Devil's Delusion, and he is an atheist, by the way, who does not believe in Darwinian evolution, and he in fact says candidly in his book, The Devil's Delusions, that Darwin was wrong. And in fact, he mentions Eugene Kuhn, for example, who I might add, is another person, is another scientist who's in the Third Way Evolutionary website, and who is part of that movement away from Darwinian evolution, among many other people that he quotes, who use observable scientific datum to extrapolate the impossibility of the theory of Darwinian evolution. So, for example, there's like the Big Bang. Eugene Kuhn calls it something like the Big Bang, spontaneous Big Bang, or something to this effect, and it's mentioned on the website and also in peer-reviewed journals. And he says that this is an alternative to the Darwinian model. But even if you just think about the fact that you have a cow, and this is the way David Berlinski, in beautiful and vivid imagery, he describes this issue. Just think about the fact that the theory of Darwinian evolution describes that you may have transformations that would render a cow, a whale, or a cow-like creature into a whale-like creature. Now, I want you to imagine, and this is what David Belinsky says, and he even says this in one of his videos or interviews that you may even find online. I want you to imagine the amount of transformations required to get a cow-like creature to a whale-like creature. I mean, the whale has a gill, whereas the cow has a lung. This is very difficult to imagine, quite frankly. And for a skeptic, I find it difficult for an atheist skeptic to come and say, yeah, I imagine that transition, even if we say there's 50,000, 100,000 transformations. Imagine what must change. And one particular evolutionary biologist, whose name skips my memory right now, he put it in a beautiful way, saying that, imagine having a Boeing 747, and as it flies, it's changing mid-air. The change has to be so that in order for it to continue gliding in the air, it can't be severe enough to change the apparatus of the plane. But when we put this into action, we're talking about the transformation from lung into gill. There are serious questions that come to mind as to how you may have some kind of intermediary. And these questions are legitimate and not only asked by lay social experimenters on YouTube, but indeed asked by leading academics who have the courage and the academic fortitude to question the dominant scientific paradigm. And you may remind the new atheist that it was exactly this courage and this intellectual fortitude and academic fortitude which helped cause the scientific revolutions aforementioned. Thus, when a new atheist almost theologizes and creates a religion out of Darwinian evolution, what they are indeed doing is in fact obstructing the course of scientific enterprise in such a way that even a group of notable non-religious biologists from all around the world have to preface on their very website that they are not creationists for fear of being reprimanded by this evangelical atheistic group. And so when you think about all of these things, you start to realize the disparity between that which is in the academic world and that which is said in public speeches and even in public or popular television programming, which I might add is sometimes hosted and directed by the likes of Richard Dawkins and David Attenborough, who is also a staunch atheist. And I hope does that answer the question?
Oh, yeah. That was good.
All right, thank you very much, brother.
You see the chat now, otherwise I'll just read out the questions in the chat.
I can't see the chat, brother, no. Can you just read out?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So Zakaria says, Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Great to have you here and follow you on the journey. I visited Speaker's Corner and heard you speak as well as on your channel. I'm a big fan and admirer of your speech and mannerisms concerning the deen. I am a PhD student studying AI applications, and I do struggle from time to time regarding balancing my studies and my deen. I do pray and fast occasionally Mondays and Thursdays, yet from time to time I come across and struggle to find the balance. I understand a teaching of the Prophet is to seek knowledge which helps motivate me for my studies, but is this applied to the deen only or other aspects of the dunya? Is this my personal misconception or is this a wide-scale problem, and if so, how do we deal with it moving forward?
Well, first of all, thank you for all of the kind words that you have said. And it's good that you are thinking about seeking knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for, He will give him understanding of the religion. And there are many ahadiths. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best of you are those who learn the Quran, for instance, and teach it, and even ayat in the Quran, which talk about ilm and the importance of knowledge. And we could even just have a lecture on that, but we're not going to do that. In terms of your question, there is a dua that is sometimes put in the books of Azkar al-Sabah al-Masa, which is Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an wa rizqan tayyiban wa amalan mutaqabbala. That, oh Allah, give me ilman nafi'a, which is beneficial knowledge, wa rizqan tayyiba, and good provision, wa amalan mutaqabbala, and accepted deeds. And the ilman nafi'a, it doesn't mean to say that ilm nafi' or the beneficial knowledge is only religious knowledge. That is because nafa' means useful. Something which is nafa' is something which is useful. And so the first thing you need to realize is that what you're already doing a PhD in AI, this will give you the qualifications and indeed even the knowledge to be able to apply what you are learning to context relating to da'wah. Now, how so? That requires brainstorming, and it requires thinking, and it requires looking at the gaps in the market. But there are many ways I can think of just from the top of my head. For example, the discussions on AI and how important these discussions are going to be in the next 30 to 50 years is something I believe is going to define the future of da'wah. Because AI and AI rights and what is AI and so on, all of these things. Another way you can be useful to the cause, if you want to call it that, is by developing software and developing applications that may help the retrieval and or proliferation or dissemination of Islamic material. So there's lots of things you can do. And if you have ihtisab, which is the idea that you're changing your intention knowingly, such that you're making something which is not directly connected with religion, you're giving it a religious motivation, then this is something, inshallah, you'll be rewarded for. I know how difficult it is to do a PhD, and I know that you will require to go to a supervisor maybe once or twice or 3 times or even 4 times a month. But the truth of the matter is that a PhD is not it's not completely paralyzing to the point where you can't do anything else. We have 168 hours in the week. Maybe you say 50 of those hours you're sleeping, and let's say 20 or 30 of those hours you're eating, drinking, and going to the shower and all those things. And if you're married, spending time with your wife or whatever it may be. So let's give that another 30 or 40 hours. You have maybe 50 or 60 hours, and that is going far for your PhD. So you have a lot more left in the week. I don't know how long it is based on my quick calculations there, shorthanded calculations. So you should actually seek the deen knowledge, because the deen knowledge is the most important knowledge of all. Knowing who Allah is, connecting yourself with the Quran, reading the Quran, memorizing parts of the Quran, doing the Azkar of Sabah and Masa. And the best thing is the consistent deed. وَإِن قَلْ, as the Prophet Muhammad said, even if it's small. Or as the Arabs say, قَلِيلٌ دَائِمٌ خَيْرٌ مِنْ كَثِيرٌ مُقَطَعٌ. That something which is small but consistent is better than that which is a lot but inconsistent. So, in terms of balance and time management, to be doing a PhD program, you require a lot of self-discipline, because you're going to be doing your own timetable. No one's going to say, come to this class or that class. It's not a taught program. You have to teach yourself and go and look into these books and go to ask your supervisor a question. If your supervisor's hands-on, or if it's not, all these things that you have to do. But if you can do this for your PhD, I'm sure you can do this, even to a lesser extent, for now, let's say, for the deen knowledge. And there's almost zero excuse considering the fact that we basically have libraries in our pockets, walking around. You have libraries in your pockets. Any book you want, almost without exception, you can get it from on your phone, on the Kindle. You can press a button, it will come to your house. We're living in very strange times, but also sometimes that can be advantageous for us. So in summary, I think continue doing what you're doing. Think about how you can be useful to the Muslims with what you're doing. And the Quran says, قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلْ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ. Everyone should work on their own form, like on what they're good at. And finally, do not forget to add the religious component, knowledge component into your weekly routine. Now, have we got any other questions?
Yeah, there's another in the chat. Qasim says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I have a question about the deen of Islam, the misconception. I don't get, are we supposed to believe and know 100% Islam is true, or do we have to just believe because my Islam studies tell me that I have to know and believe, but how can I know 100% that Islam is true? When there is philosophical ideas follow, like how do we know that the higher being is pretending that he is Allah and has made a fake narrative, or some extreme possibilities like these that people may bring up, or even that the possibility that Allah is lying, or the possibility that man came in the future to make these prophecies in the Quran and Hadith, and knowledge like some extra thoughts like this. Barakallah Feek, please help me with this thought process. My iman has been affected a lot by these thoughts.
Yeah, so you ask a good question. The difference between having internal doubts and manifesting them outwardly is a huge difference in the theology of Islam. As for those internal doubts that you have and these questions, which either come from you and or the shaitan, or a combination of both, because the Quran says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقَنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ, that we have created the human being and we know what his own self whispers to him, yani to himself. And also the Quran tells us of the shaitan in Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas, and how the shaitan may try and enter your thoughts in this way. And so the doubts that you may have, so long as you are not actualizing it in terms of speech and action, Allah will not hold you to account for those thoughts, because this goes under the banner of لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not hold to account a person more than what they can handle. But the Quran also refers to itself and the truth that it brings as al-urwat al-wuthqa, or the solid anchorage, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فما يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى. That there's no compulsion in religion. Truth has been made clear from falsehood. So whoever believes in the truth and disbelieves in the falsehood, so they have held on to the firm anchorage. Because in a world where almost anything can be critiqued, Islam, or the concept of Tawheed and the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, will and has undergone the most intense amount of academic and societal scrutiny. Yet, Islam is a living religion that has been continually going on for 1,400 years. Now, employing criticality and being a skeptic are two different things. Being a skeptic, someone who questions almost everything, this is almost tantamount to a mental disorder. Because having the agony of questioning things to a high level, psychologically will put you in a state of cognitive dissonance quite regularly. Meaning that you'll always have there'll always be a tension between the life that you lead and the thoughts and processes that you have in your mind. So what needs to happen is you need to combine probabilistic reasoning with, which is a rational thing, and this goes back to the last question I was talking with, daily routines of a religious kind. For example, the 5 prayers, keeping away from the major sins, doing the adhkar of sabah and masa, and so on and so forth. This is the spiritual aspect. The intellectual aspect is to realize that actually, epistemologically, extreme skepticism is one of the weakest ways to know about reality. It's deconstructionist in nature. It's cancerous in that sense. It's like a fire. And indeed, you may feel the doubts in your heart as if they are a flame like a fire. Because it gives you stock reasoning to doubt something which in reality ought not to be doubted. And in epistemic reality, you wouldn't really doubt if it was in other contexts. And this is the problem with a lot of atheists. That when it comes to, for example, and this is easily found when discussions in the fine-tuning, they'll go into so many different discussions about multiverses and whatever. And they'll employ the most extreme of doubts. But when they are dealing with everyday life, when they wake up in the morning and they put coffee into their mug and they drink it, and then they go on a plane and they go on an elevator, when they're pressing the button for the elevator, what do they have? They have غالب ظن, as what Fakhruddin al-Razi, he mentions this in one of his, because he had very similar struggles. He said that I don't have, like, on a logical level, غالب ظن means everything is just highly probable. There's nothing which is certain, and that's it. But the truth is, there's a fine line between the two. Because if I press a button to get an elevator, and then me and my children all go into the elevator and I press 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, whatever, my mind is telling me, look, on the basis of probability, this elevator is not going to fall. Now, is there a chance that the elevator will fall? Yes. You may be in a house right now. Is there a chance that the roof on top of your head is going to fall on you? Yes. Is there? And you got to show yourself your own psychological inconsistencies. So as it relates to contextualizing theology and philosophy, abstract philosophy, you're an extreme skeptic. But on your day-to-day life, you don't operate on that paradigm. Otherwise, you would be on a mental hospital. You'd be in a mental hospital. That's why I say this is tantamount to almost a psychological marad. It's like a disease of some sorts. I can't press that button because if this happens, and then for those people, they actually get therapy. I mean, the NHS actually provides therapy for them. And I would say maybe that is a good option for you. Maybe a Muslim therapist of some sorts, but the therapy that they provide on the NHS is a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And no, it's not psychiatrists that run it, it's counselors that have done this kind of course. But the entire paradigm is or the objective is to show people, rationalize to people why their biggest anxieties are unlikely to actually be the case. Like when you're on a bridge and walking, what's the chance that the bridge is going to fall and you're going to fall with it? There is a philosophical chance. But do you think that every time you do that? When you go on the train or the plane or the automobile, when you're even walking in the street, there's a vague chance that someone's going to kill you or choke you or take your money, but you still walk in the streets. So it's that level of inconsistency between how you look at theology and philosophy abstractly on the one hand, and then how you live your life on the other. And what you need to create is a merger, such that the epistemology that you use in your day-to-day life, which satisfies your curiosity for truth, is the same exact epistemology that you should be using in the abstract fields of religion and philosophy, namely a probabilistic type of epistemology. That's why you can be skeptical and doubt everything, but there is a difference between a reasonable doubt and an improbable, unreasonable doubt. And once you've got that in your mind, then you can start living and being free from those doubts that you have. That's the end of it.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait,
Is
you know,
that-
I have actually one thing. I know it's a stupid topic, but sorry about
Mhm.
if you when they teach me in the Islamic studies here, like you be certain 100%. Am I lying to myself that I'm being certain when I say yes to them, or is it come back to that first thing you said when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not hurt me for those thoughts or punish me
Yeah,
for
he
those
doesn't
thoughts?
punish you. No, it doesn't take into account. There's different like the Quran. It talks about different types of certainty. So ilmul yaqeen, which is the knowledge of certainty, or if you want abstract certainty, and then you have ainul yaqeen, the empirical certainty with your eye that you see it. And the Quran says, لَتَرَوُنَّهَا عَيْنَ الْيَقِينِ. You're going to see the hellfire as an empirical reality, something which you see with, and you will find out this is certain based on that. So, and there's haqqul yaqeen, also mentioned in the Quran, which is the truth of certainty. So you can't say that yaqeen is actually a high level of iman. It's one of the highest levels of iman. But if you're not mutayaqqin, or you don't have full yaqeen, it doesn't mean you're kafir. It just means that you have a lower level of iman. And the Quran addresses the people with no yaqeen, actually. For example, he says in Surah, I think it's Muzammil, وَلِيَسْتَيْقِنِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ وَلِيَزْدَادَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِيمَانًا. That istiqan is to increase in yaqeen. So Allah, in His Majesty, when He's, for example, doing certain commands or something, Allah said this is to help them get yaqeen. Because istayqin means that they don't have it yet, that they are getting it. للطلب, seen للطلب. So doesn't mean that you are kafir because you're a disbeliever. It's not like you either have yaqeen or you're a disbeliever. No, there are shades in the middle, shades of grey in the middle. And so it just means that you want to increase that, and you should make specific dua that Allah give you yaqeen.
Barakallahu feek. That actually helped a lot. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, brother.
Awesome.
So one of the other questions in the chat, let me just find it. Alaikum, how should we answer, are men and women equal in Islam? Jazakallah khairan.
So we answer by saying through the Islamic paradigm, they are, but in a way which is different to the way that second wave feminists say that they are. So the Prophet says, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ, that certainly men are equal to women. But he said that in the context of legislation. Because the Quran also says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى, that the male is not the same as the female. So it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It just means that they're not the same, which is an obvious thing, you would think. But the certain movements of today has made us cast aspersion on this notion, right? But the idea is that in terms of in front of the law and on a spiritual level, yes, there is equality. But there are some prescriptions, as everyone knows, which are exemptions to the law or to the rule. And everyone knows those exemptions. And the main point here to note is that second wave feminists, like Betty Friedan, like Simone de Beauvoir, like Germaine Greer, all of them really have the same basic idea, which is that they all acknowledge the differences, biological, physiological, psychological, and emotional differences between men and women. But they said, all of them, that despite those differences, that there should be equality between men and women in all cases, without exception. And we have seen the failure of the second wave movement to actually put that into policy recommendation format. Because we have seen that the major things that feminists have wanted proportional representation in is government positions and the top, let's say, FTSE 100 companies in the UK, or the top companies in the UK, or in any other part of the West. They haven't been consistent because they haven't asked for the same things in relation to, but not limited to, coal mining, the army, highly dangerous jobs, and so on and so forth. Feminists have not been asking, for the most part, second wave, for an equality of representation in those fields. And indeed, if they did, it would be a huge problem for them. To take the American example as an ample example here, America has had 11 wars since its inception in 1776, or its independence. 11 wars in its history. And many of those wars have had drafts, meaning forcible entry into the army, and those drafts have been male only. In other words, they force men to fight. Okay, now if you want a reversal, or if you want to recalibrate the historical injustices of inequality, what feminists should in theory be at least proposing abstractly is that there may be either a draft of the same magnitude for women that exist now, or that any other drafts that take place in the history of America or any other country should be 50-50 in terms of should have 50% males and 50% females. And this is why I recommend a book or a series of books written. Actually, I have some of them here. I have some of them here. I can show you them, but I'll just tell you the names of them. By Warren Farrell. Probably the best book to read on this is his book, The Myth of Male Power. He has another book called The Liberated Man. He has another book called The Boy Crisis, which is his most recent book. It's an interesting book. And obviously he believes in equality of some sorts, even on their paradigm, but he shows that how there has been inconsistencies to this regard. Now, if you don't like reading books, there is a documentary which you have to buy on YouTube, I believe. It's called the Red Pill documentary. Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything on that documentary, but it's an interesting and highly edifying documentary which will give you another perspective. It's called the Red Pill documentary. And it shows you the backlash, and there's a whole genre of literature now coming out called backlash literature, which is supposedly a backlash to the second wave of feminism. And interestingly, the work that has been done by professors and academics on this field is extremely damning to second wave notions. For example, James Tooley, that's Tooley, has written a book called The Miseducation of Women, I believe that's the name of his book. And he was originally in the University of Newcastle. I think now he's in Buckinghamshire University. Conducted one of the most cross-cultural or biggest studies, and quotes many studies showing that 30 to 40% of women today are more unhappy in terms of psychological welfare than they were before the second wave of feminism. That's almost 50% that report that they are more unhappy. And he believes that the main reasoning for this is because of the misguided, in his own terms, misguided and destructive second wave prescriptions of devaluing the wife, and by extension the homemaker, or whatever they call women that stay at home nowadays, what's the politically correct term, and the mother, which is even more detrimental. So when women now, they decide to, they prioritize careers over family and motherhood, they report, according to these studies, much more unhappiness in their life, as was the case before such movement had its pervasive and corrosive impact. And this is why many people are leaving feminism, such that YouGov, one of the surveys, I believe it was less than 10% of German women who identified as feminists. Because it just does not take into consideration the physiological, the psychological, the emotional, and the physical differences between men and women. I'll give you one really interesting example, which I believe, I'm going to read out the abstract of this. It's really interesting, and the reason why I'm actually, one second. Yeah, okay, here we go. It's a peer-reviewed. It's a peer-reviewed study, and it's by Roy Baumeister and Kathleen Catanese and Kathleen Voss. Okay, and the question that they are asking is there a gender difference in strength of sex drive, theoretical views, conceptual distinctions, and review of relevant evidence? And I'm just going to read the abstract here to show you the fallacy that has been presented, which is that on a sexual level, sexual drive level, there is no difference. And this is something which is rampant in second wave feministic literature. There's no difference between man and woman. Both of them have the same level of sexual attractivity and motivation. The abstract says this: the sex drive refers to the strength of sexual motivation. Across many studies and measures, men have been shown to have more frequent and more intense sexual desires than women, as reflected in spontaneous thoughts about sex, frequency and variety of sexual fantasies, desired frequency of intercourse, desired number of partners, masturbation, liking for various sexual practices, willingness to forego sex, or obviously lack thereof in the case of men, comparative to women, initiating versus refusing sex, making sacrifices for sex, and other measures. No contrary findings indicating stronger sexual motivation among women were found. Hence, we conclude that the male sex drive is stronger than the female sex drive. The gender difference in sex drive should not be generalized to other constructs such as sexual orgasmic capacity, enjoyment of sex, or extrinsically motivated sex. Why did we need to put tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars for such a huge study to be done, outlining what the Bedouin or an Eskimo or a farmer would have told you without requirement of any academic qualification. Anybody who has sexual experience with a woman, almost everybody will, this is observation. But the second wave feministic model has made us so ignorant of our differences between men and women that we need to put tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds into studies that tell us the male sex drive, the conclusion of is that the male sex drive is stronger than the female sex drive. And this is not a lone study. By the way, there are many studies like this. There is almost nothing in the literature that indicates the opposite of this. So why do we need to put money into it? It's because the feminist movement has made us stupid, has made us dumb, has actually made us question the obvious. It makes us, you talk about doubts, it makes us skeptics of observable realities. And as such, it has been a great failure. It has been a great failure on every single front. It's been an educational failure. It's been a psychological failure. It's been a sociological failure. And that is why people are chucking it away. That's why women don't want to associate with it. And that's why there's a huge backlash now against it. And hopefully that answers the question. You go with the next question, brother?
Yeah, so which modern day Arabic dialect would you say resembles the closest to the classical Arabic dialect, the one found in the Quran?
There's a difference of opinion among linguists on this. And I'm not a linguist, so I would have to suspend judgment on this particular question. I don't know. Put it
Okay,
that way,
that's
you know?
fine.
Yeah.
So someone else thinks, Jazakallah here, could you recommend any good books in Islamic history and books deconstructing atheism?
So in terms of books deconstructing atheism, obviously I'm going to promote my own material. This is a good book. It's called Kalam Cosmological Arguments. This is, it's the book that I've written. This is more a historical review of, so it's a kind of like what the medieval scholars, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Sina, and so on, how they kind of understood it, the arguments for the existence of God, Kalam Cosmological Argument. And then you have this book here, which is called, and I think this is good, it's an academic read, called The Necessary Existence by Joshua Rasmussen. And I like this argument for God's existence because he deals with objections in it as well. If you want a lighter read, just hold on for a second, I'll show you them. Yeah, I'm just in. This is my office, the bed. This is my office. So, show you some of the books that we got here. All right, so this book is good. It's for atheism. This one's a very accessible read. It's by once again, Joshua Rasmussen. It's called How Reason Can Lead to God. How Reason Can Lead to God by Joshua Rasmussen. Excellent book. Very, very, very accessible. You can read that. You should also read, this is one of the most famous books in terms of problem of evil by Alvin Plantinga. So you can read that as well. Yeah, these are Warren Farron's books. So this is some of his books. Does Femininate discriminate against men. War of Aaron. This is one of his books. It's a debate. So half of the book is like written by him, and the other one's written by feminists. So you kind of get both sides of the story there. Sorry, let me put this back on. This is if you want to get triggered, and this is I mean it's not an academic book, but it's just I don't know. This is what feminism looks like when it's directed against, because this is what it sounds like, right? If you want to know what second wave feminism sounds like from the direction of a man, read The Manipulated Man by this woman called Esther Villa. Now, this is how I feel a woman reading this will get triggered straight away. Any woman, because it's just nonsense stuff. But this is how people feel when they read feministic books. This is how a lot of people read it. All right, so just if you wanna read that, and maybe get a book on ethics. Why not? Like this is called by Mackey, G.C. Mackey, G.L. Mackey, sorry, on that. And then you can have this book. I mean, I didn't find this one particularly interesting, to be honest. And I think they have like atheistic leanings. The God Debates by John Shook, but it's by a variety of different. I'm not sure if it's him writing it throughout the way, but yeah, it's not a great book, to be honest. That one, don't get that one. But yeah, the rest of them are all right. Then you have obviously God's Undertaker by John Lennox, which is a very good book as well, like very accessible, and a few others. I mentioned already The Devil's Delusion by David Belinsky, and I wrote in a small pamphlet book you can download for free called The Scientific Deceptions of the New Atheists from the Sapiens Institute. So these are some of the recommendations.
The next question is, it's written in authentic hadith, the Prophet's parents are in hell. How can this be if they lived in a time of Jahiliyyah where the Prophet was given his elevation? And why does it say in present tense when people are in the graves till the Day of Judgment?
This is in Arabic. Sometimes you may do that. You can use the past for the present or the future. For example, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The ones in chapter 23, verse 1 of the Quran, where it says that the ones who have become believers are successful. But it's in the past tense, and it's talking about the present and the future. So, like from a linguistic perspective, there's no issue with that. Some scholars have tried to do ta'weel of this particular hadith. But the truth of the matter is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wouldn't say something like this unless he had been given some kind of information from Jibreel. Now, if you are asking how comes when he was in the interim period, well, we know that the people that are in the interim period, called Ahlul Fatra, with a ta, not with a ta, not fitra, but fatra, that those individuals will be tested individually on the Day of Judgment. So it's as good as saying that, you know, he got news that his father was tested on the Day of Judgment and he failed that test. And why would he say that? I mean, think about it from an emotional perspective. He didn't have any problem with his father. Why would he say that about his own father unless he really wanted to disconnect, you know, his own personal inclinations and motivations from the guidance that Allah is giving him? I think, if anything, this is one of those hadiths you can look at and say, subhanallah, you can see that this man is a true prophet. Because people that are, if you're an imposter, you want your own family to be, you know, seen as the highest, your mother, your father. It wasn't seen like that. It wasn't seen like that. You know, and it's the same kind of thing happens with Abu Talib when he dies. And the Quran, and he was making istighfar for Abu Talib, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down Surah At-Tawbah, ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين ولو كانوا أولي قربى من بعد ما تبين لهم أنهم أصحاب الجحيم وما كان استغفار إبراهيم لأبيه إلا عن موعدة وعدها إياه فلما تبين له أنه عدو لله تبرأ منه إن إبراهيم كان أواه حليم. Or I don't think كان is in there. But the ayahs which say that, you know, it wasn't for a prophet or the believers to make istighfar of people that die, who after it's made clear to them that they're Ashab al-Jahim, that they're the companions of hell. And then Allah mentions Ibrahim doing so, but he did so in the beginning. And then Allah says that فَلَمَّا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ أَنَّهُ عَدُوٌ لِلَّهِ تَبَرَّأَ مِنْهُ. When he found out that this is an enemy of Allah, he disconnected himself, freed himself from him. So this idea, subhanallah, you love your own parents, you love your own children, but it's not always the case that the parents of the prophets or the children of them have to be in heaven. It's not an issue at all. In the Quran, Nuh's son goes to hell. He's a kafir. Lut's wife goes to hell. Nuh's wife goes to hell. You know, as it says in Surah Al-Tahrim, كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا فخانتاهما. That they were both underneath, يعني two of good, يعني you're talking about Imra'at Lut and Imra'at Nuh, the wife of Noah and Lot. So your husband can be, because Fir'aun was a kafir, but his wife was a mu'min, and Allah praises his wife and he dispraises Fir'aun. So you can have family members which are disbelievers. There's nothing theologically problematic with that, in my opinion. And if anything, it's a proof of prophethood, actually, if you think about it with attentiveness.
The next question is saying, I have a close friend who left Islam. I questioned them about why they left, and they said they're no longer interested in religion. What advice would you give me?
Then don't be interested in them. At the end of the day, if they're not interested in religion, just, you know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi. You know, the person is on the religion of his friend. So let him be careful of who he takes as a friend. And there are many ahadith to this effect. So if you don't see yourself having an influence on her, I would say to you to disconnect from this individual, you know, and find new good friends, spiritually uplifting, productive friends. Otherwise, she's going to drag you down with her, believe me. So don't say anything to her. If she's not interested and she's putting her fingers in her ears, then you know what? We've got other people out there that will be interested in religion. You don't need to be interested in it. But don't waste your time with this person. Honestly, if that's how they're speaking, if they don't come to you asking, then don't waste time with them. In fact, try and cut them off. Or if at least not cut them off, try and separate yourself from them and reduce the time you spend with them. And if you do spend time with them, at least one in every 5 or 6 times you see them, bring up religion. And if you find that they are so allergic to it on those conversations, then cut the person off, because they're a waste of your time.
So the next question is, I have a question regarding tolerance in Islam. According to the Sharia, to what extent should the practice of faiths other than Islam be allowed? I'm an expat in Saudi Arabia, which has a very specific point of view regarding this topic, and is one which is very controversial in the West. I've heard differing points of view on this topic and would love to hear what you have to say about it. Jazakallah khairan.
So the question say that to what extent can the practice of Islam?
According to the Sharia, to what extent should the practice of faiths other than Islam be allowed?
It's interesting because I read one time a tafsir of Al-Qurtubi to the ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, he says, حَتَّى يُعْطُوا الْجِزْيَةَ عَنْ يَدٍ وَهُمْ صَغِرُونَ. The ayah is long, you know. But this is the end part of the ayah about jizya. I think this is the only part in the Quran where the word jizya comes up. But yeah, this is the only part in the Quran. I believe, where the word jizya comes up. So yeah, this Al-Qurtubi has an interesting discussion, and in it he says things like, in an Islamic state, because Al-Qurtubi's tafsir is quite compendious compared to Tabari's and Ibn Kathir's and stuff. They're small in comparison, and the ahkam of a particular verse and everything connected to that verse, Al-Qurtubi just puts everything in there. So he talks about jizya, and he talks about also, for another reason, one reason or another, he talks about the extent to which the Jews and Christians may drink alcohol within the Islamic state, and he basically says they can do it, and he says that it can't be in the Muslim areas. I really do think that Saudi Arabia is not the best model to assess the entirety of Islam. Saudi Arabia is a country for the last 20 or 30 years which the fiqh that has been promulgated is Hanbali fiqh, but not just any Hanbali fiqh. For the most part, is from the Mutawassitin min al-Hanabila. So a very special type of Hanbalis, like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qudama, and other than them. And so obviously Ibn Uthaymeen, who is one of the big scholars, he, in terms of fiqh, he basically follows Ibn Taymiyyah, which can be good and bad. I'm not saying it is what it is. That's just how it is. But in addition to that, the rules for segregation and male and women mixing and stuff like this, I've spoken to many mashayikh and ulama in Saudi Arabia personally, and many of them, and I'm not going to mention their names because they haven't given me permission to do so, they see that in some parts of Saudi Arabia, like Riyadh and so on, that the rules for intermixing between males and females are way over the top. And the cultures and traditions are way over the top. It's nothing like what was there in the time of the Prophet, where the aswaq were basically free mixed, and where you walk in the street and it was basically free mixed, and you'd go into the masjid and basically there was men and women in the same place, but there was no barrier between them. This is the haqq, the reality, the historical reality. But this historical reality was not shown in the previous time, in the contemporary period, in large swathes of Saudi Arabia, where women were not even allowed to drive cars, which is the most ridiculous fatwa that has probably been made in the history of Islam. One of the most outlandish and aberrational fatwa that we've ever seen. And we've not seen this fatwa, not even in any religion. Yani, forget about Islam. We have not seen it in any. Jews haven't even done this. The Haredi Jews haven't. No one has done that. And they do it min bab sadd al-dhara'i', which is an usuli term for stopping mischief. And it's the most ridiculous thing, because all the Saudi Arabians I speak to, I mean, I have one Saudi Arabian friend who's lived in a place called Jazan, which is next to Yemen. And he had a friend who was a taxi driver. And basically he was telling me, man, the taxi driver, he because the women can't drive their own car. Oh, now they can, but before they couldn't. They couldn't drive their own cars, so the taxi driver would pick them up and take them place to place. And this particular taxi driver was a fasiq, because he admitted that, I used to have sex with all of these people, these women. I used to have sex with that one. What said the dhara'a? When you're putting a woman and you're forcing her in the car with a man as a stranger, what said the dhara'a? Who on earth gave you this fatwa? And then when the MBS changes the fatwa, then you see that some of the big ulama, they also change the fatwa. No. This is clearly not a good representation of Islam. And it's not a good representation of how there should be gender communication, and so on and so forth. I don't know about how, from what I know, a lot of my friends who are white guys who went to Saudi Arabia, they will tell me that they look at them like, sorry to say, gods. They do. It's true. There is a post-colonial attitude there towards the white man. So I don't know. When you do qiyas on Saudi Arabia over the rest of the Muslim world or the historical Islamic, it's the worst thing to do. It's a particular culture with many good things in it. I've mentioned some bad things, but there are many very good things. Like the custodian, If Mecca and Medina were in other countries, imagine if Mecca and Medina was in Egypt or something. No one would be going to Hajj. It would be impossible to. Allah has given them provision so that they can allow Hajj to continue. And wallahi, this itself is a miracle. Because imagine if this Mecca and Medina were in other places in the world, with the proliferation of the human project to 7 billion people. And almost 2 billion of them are Muslims. And how many of them need to go Hajj a year? Hajj would have been not mutah. Imagine if Saudi Arabia was still pre-1930s and didn't have the money that it had. Hajj would be extremely expensive. It would be for the rich. Hajj would be for the extreme rich people. And so Allah has allowed and given provision to Saudi Arabia to do all of these things. And there are so many good things that have come out of that land. Many, many good things. Including many ulama. Including Mecca and Medina. Including what has the facilitation of Umrah. And so many things. But there are also things which have nothing to do with Islam. And that fatwas of which you'll not find in Kutub al-Fiqh of the 7th century or 8th century, anything like that. And which are very specific to that country. So it's important not to do qiyas. The truth of the matter is wherever Islam goes and dominates, there's two things that come together. The urf of that country or the particular custom and Islam. And the truth of the matter is the urf is actually extremely important. Because urf, it dictates a huge percentage of how the state will look like. In terms of the gender relations, in terms of relations with non-Muslims. Because the Sharia doesn't spell out everything. I mean, the Sharia doesn't tell us what speed we should be driving on the road. You see, there's lots of things the Sharia doesn't spell out. So it's not just a reductionist analysis of, oh, if the Sharia goes into this country, it will look like this. No, if the Sharia goes into Africa, it will look completely different to if it goes into Malaysia. And we have seen this already. We have seen this already because urf and the customs of the people is a huge factor. And the Islamic world, historically and contemporaneously, is not is not a monolith. It's not a monolith. So that's how I would answer the question. Hopefully did that answer the question? Or was there any follow-ups on that?
He's saying great answer. There are a few
Okay.
more questions. I'll just try to quickly go through them. One person saying, what is the response to the questioning of why the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever you find doing the action of the people of Lut, kill them, the one who does it and the one to whom it is done?
I don't know of the authenticity of that hadith. And that requires bahth. But it's definitely not ijma' sahih. Because if it was, the Ahnaf would have nowhere to go. Because the Hanafi school of thought does not stipulate any punishment for homosexuality. There is no punishment, even if there are witnesses. And that might be a big... but this is manqul, even the Hanabala do naql of that. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah in his Kitab al-Da' wal-Dawa, he mentions that the Ahnaf have no... they don't have any punishment for that. And he doesn't mention this hadith. His main istishhad, or his main evidences, is not with this hadith, which may have problems, which I can't tell you about now. But his main istishhad is with the aqwal of the Sahaba, or the doings and of what the friends of the companions of the Prophet did. So in terms of the Hanafi school, which is the majority of the Muslim world, there is actually no punishment for this sexual behavior. In terms of the other madhahib, there is a punishment, and however, lesbianism, two women having intercourse, it's not even seen in the Sharia as intercourse, quite frankly. But it's sexual play, let's say, or enjoyment, or pleasure, or gratification, whatever you want to. There is no death penalty for that, or actually there's no stipulated punishment for that. So most scholars say there's ta'zirat. Ta'zirat are basically whatever the decision of the disciplinary position is of the Hakim. And so, yeah, that's how I would answer this.
One other question is, in the modern era, there is so much hizb amongst Muslims, so much so that the da'wah has shifted from calling to Islam to defending and refuting sects. Any thoughts and advice about this?
Yeah, and that's something which the Prophet foretold. He told us the hadith of iftiraq, and even the Quran really. كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون. Every hizb from what they have are happy, and obviously what we want to do is keep away from tahazzub or hizbiyah. But it's important. There are some people. This is what you have. There's negotiating tables and there's battlefields, and that's life. Look, life is just negotiating tables and battlefields. And whether it's inside of Islam or outside of it, whether it's with your family or your friends, whether it's with the community or not with the community, you have to decide whether the course of action that you're going to take with said person or said people is going to be a battlefield action or a negotiating action. That's basically it. People you love and people you want to cooperate with, then there is negotiation. If they show that they want to be peaceful, then you have to be peaceful. The Quran even says this about enemies attacking Islam. وَجَنَحُوا لِلسِّلْمِ فَجَنَحْ لَهَا وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And if they lean towards peace, then also lean towards it and have reliance upon Allah. But it doesn't mean to say now that there is no place for having battlefield action with people within the religion who are spoiling it from within. Because this is so important that the Quran dedicates so much content to dealing with the munafiqs, the hypocrites, the ones who pretend to be a Muslim, and actually are not Muslim. And Allah threatens them, He humiliates them, He exposes them, and He warns us about them. And so the same kind of thing needs to be done with extremists within our own midst. And we have our own understanding of ghulu and extremism, by the way. And the Prophet said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْغُلُو فِي الدِّينِ. He actually said, beware of extremism in religion. The Prophet said that. That's a hadith. And so we need to identify the extremists. And I'm not just talking about terrorists. We're talking about madakhila, terrorists, this one here, this one there, extreme militia supporting Shia, Khomeini supporting Shia. All of those people we need to know who they are, and we need to be careful of them. And we need to deal with them accordingly, and we need to have a polemic against them in the lawful and ideological way that they need to be dealt with. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's like a cancer. It's going to eat us up from within. So anyone who wants to get into da'wah, it's foolish to think, and it's naive and gullible, that you're going to come in and everyone is going to be on your side just because they claim that they are Muslim. You need to be as weary of the Muslims, if not more weary of the so-called Muslims. A lot of them have agendas. A lot of them want to see your downfall. A lot of them want to break Islam from within, as you are from the enemies outside. You need to be looking everywhere. And this is life. And we're not in an idealistic world. The fact that Islam has almost 2 billion followers, it means that the problems are going to be compounded. It means that there are going to be more of these figures and people that they have these inclinations. Which is why I believe that, there's 2 approaches. Either be silent and ignore them, and then all of these particular groups they're going to have their own spokespeople and salesmen, and they're going to bring in our vulnerable, normal, mainstream youth into their ranks. And it was the silence of the Muslim community that led to the fact that you have these cults in the first place. You can't just say, well, ignore them, they are like this. Well, ignore them. they will prey on the minds, the vulnerable minds of the young, impressionable Muslims. So my approach is not to ignore them, to actually face them head on. And as for those who only have small differences with us and whatever, then there's negotiating tables.
Can I just ask some follow-up questions on that, please?
Yes, of course, yeah.
So obviously you've had experience in this matter. What would you say is one of your most tried and tested effective methods of, for example, combating the fringe cults? And second question, where do you see this cultish behavior going in the future? Do you think it would be eradicated? Do you think it would grow into like a subsect, or what do you think would happen? Thank you.
Well, I don't know about the future. That's to be seen. But in terms of my own dealings, we have found that it's been extremely effective to call them out directly and to attack them directly. Those individuals who are spoiling the religion from within. And we're not just talking about the takfiris and those people who, want to commit monstrous acts, terrorist acts, and so on. We're not talking just about them. We're talking about also the madkhalites, who are as bad almost as the takfiris in many ways, who in many countries will be calling for the death of people and having exactly the same behaviors. The Shi'is, who, once again, a lot of them will connect themselves with militant groups in Iran and will see the death of Sunnis as a pleasurable thing, even if they are civilians. And other such groups who are theologically deviant, completely deviant, not to the point where we can actually, have a discussion, and where actually your ijtihad, or whatever you want to call it, is causing death, division, and problems within the Muslim community. So I actually believe we have a duty to deal with those individuals in the Ummah, and show as much confidence to them as they do to you. And don't be scared of their... Look, I mean, the Arabs have a saying, "Man amin al-uqubata asa al-adab." Whoever doesn't fear the consequences is going to get rude. You can't... In life, there's only so much we can allow people, whoever they may be, whether friends, colleagues, spouses, or otherwise, to do what they want to do with us. There's limits, and obviously this includes sects within Islam as well. They can't do what they want. They can't do what they want. There has to be consequences, otherwise they will continue.
So I know time's getting on now, so I'll just wrap up with one last question.
Yeah.
So Mus was saying, Jazakallah khair for the answer and your time, Brother Muhammad. Will you be doing Q&A like this in the future?
Is that the last question?
Yeah, because I know time's getting on for everyone. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see, inshallah.
yeah, Jazakallah khair for the talk. It was very beneficial, I think, to everyone here.
Jazakumullah khairan, man. It was beneficial for me as well.
Come to Bristol next time, Akhi.
It has to be done, brother.
Inshallah.
Oh, I can see the look at this. Subhanallah. There's people on the chats. I can see the chats now. Yeah, let me quickly look at it and see if have we missed anything out on the chats, brother?
One or two other questions, I think, if you want, you can answer them. Wait,
Where are they? Let's get them out of the way. No one put anything now, because I know I can see. Just so I can feel like everyone's gotten the answer they want. Where are the questions? You read them quickly, bro.
So one is, let me just quickly find them.
Read out the question from Sina. It's from there onwards. Those are the last
Yeah.
section of questions.
So, could you also recommend any good books in Islamic history?
Well, yeah, Al-Bidayah wa-Nihaya of Ibn Kathir is an interesting book. If you want, there's actually some books written by non-Muslims, which are quite good. One of them, let me get the full name of it in English, because yeah, it's called The Preaching of Islam by Thomas Walker Arnold. This is a very good book. It's very good. It's pretty, and the fact that it's a non-Muslim as well that's written this, it makes it a good source for someone if you want to kind of reference it to people. You can reference it, and if it's non-Muslims you want to reference it to, it will be more weighty than obviously if it was a Muslim, because they will feel like the bias is not there. In terms of Sirah, you should get The Sealed Nectar, which is a very good book. And if you're talking about general history, then A Brief History of the World, I think that's what it's called. It's a very good book. I read it some years ago now. Is it called A Brief History of Time? No. Of the World. Yes, it's by no. Maybe no, it's not. A Little History of the World. Sorry, by Gombrich. E.H. Gombrich. You can get it for £4 online. It's a good general history book to have. So hopefully those three will be enough for you to. Because I don't want to give you. I mean, there are huge books of history, but for the most part, people are not going to be reading those. These are very readable. Well, they're very readable and accessible as well.
So one other question is, what direct evidence is there from the Quran and Sunnah that a judge can decide a ta'zir or punishment made up by themselves, even if that punishment has never been stipulated in Sunnah ever?
Yeah, so for example, what direct evidence is there from the Quran and Sunnah that you can do what direct evidence is there in the Quran and Sunnah that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for instance, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, when he says مثل ما قتل من النعم, they are مثل ما قتل من النعم. This ayah is basically saying that if you are inside, or if you are in state of ihram and you kill an animal, then you have to فَجَزَاءٌ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعْمِ. You have to get some kind of an equal sized animal, and you have to sacrifice it. So now the question is, what do you mean by equal sized animal? So all the books I'm giving you this to show you how qiyas works. For instance, all the books of fiqh say that if you, for example, kill a camel, you have to substitute it with an ostrich. What's a camel got to do with an ostrich? They say because it's quite similar in size, and they're doing their own ijtihad here. So Shafi'i, he writes in his book Risala that in issues where there is no clear nas, there has to be qiyas that is made. Now qiyas is the fourth principle of extrapolation of many. Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', then Qiyas. Because I could ask, what is the direct evidence of marijuana being haram? I mean, what is the direct evidence of mortgages being haram? Mortgages are haram because the hadith, first of all, it says riba, but then the hadith talks about what kind of riba. That's tafsil of it. It says al-dhahabu bil-dhahab. The hadith of Abdullah bin Samit, which is the Umda hadith, the key hadith, الذهب بالذهب يد بيد, يعني hand in hand, ذهب بفضة. You can't sell gold for gold or silver for silver. So a Zahiri that doesn't believe in Qiyas, as many Zahiris actually, by the way, do believe in this, that this is not talking about currency, and therefore mortgages and all of this is halal, because they don't believe in Qiyas. And likewise, they would be saying that if we're talking about khamr has direct connotations. Yes, and Umar said ما يسكر العقل and so on, but the truth is there is a qiyas that is done from the wine that was drank at that time to the marijuana, which has the same effect, is intoxicating effect. So this is the process of qiyas. Why I'm telling you all of this is because to show you that it's not just. Okay, I'll give you a better example actually, and this might be a bit of a freaky example. This is a freaky example. Where does it say you cannot hit your parents in the Quran? It doesn't say you cannot hit your parents in the Quran. But it says وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَاهَا وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفْ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. Yeah, and all of these things. Don't say uff to them, be good to them, etc. But it doesn't say don't hit your parents. It doesn't actually say don't hit your parents. Okay, I've got another one, even more ridiculous, and this shows you the futility of arguments from a literalistic perspective without qiyas. I would say, where is the evidence? This is going to be disgusting, so I apologize in advance. Where is the evidence in the Quran and Sunnah? Because zina in the Quran and Sunnah, in the fiqh definition, means like the hashafa goes into the farj al-mar'a, which basically the head of the penis goes into the. That's what it goes in. So if I say, okay, I'm zahiri now, where's the direct evidence, for the sake of argument, that oral sex between a man and another man, not even a woman, another man, that is, where's the direct evidence that says that that's haram? There's no direct evidence, but we know that Allah, He done them of the luwat, of whatever you want to call it, the action of homosexuality, and we do qiyas, any sexual interaction between man and woman. Bab awla, this is maqis alayh, by the way, it's not mantuq. This is, there's no clear thing that says don't do this, but it's all qiyas. And if you get rid of qiyas, you're going to start making a mockery out of the religion of Islam. Which is why now the ulama, when they say ta'zir or there's some kind of other punishment or something like this, they're doing a kind of qiyas, and they're doing it on other ahkam which are similar to it. So you have to be careful, because the hard line zahiri, not just a Salafi approach, a zahiri approach. Because there's a Salafi approach of fiqh al-tarjih, this is al-qawl arjah. They don't believe in madhahib, and so they'll say that this is more the stronger opinion, okay, for instance, than this. But then there's the zahiri approach, which says that basically we won't accept anything unless it's specifically mentioned, like by word and by letter. And that's not how the jurists understood it, and that's not how the Salaf understood it. That's not how anybody understood it. And that's why Shafi'i wrote this book called the Risala, which he put the principles for a scholar to look at when they are talking about ahkam. It's not for anyone to just say, oh, direct evidence, this and that. Because if you want direct evidences like this, you're going to not find them on very key issues that if you allow, the religion will become some liberal religion or some ridiculous thing, Abu Layth style, this guy, this individual religion. You don't want this. So that's why it's important to stick to the bulk of what the ulama have said and to follow that mainstream. And inshallah, anything that comes away from that should be a red flag immediately. Hopefully that answers the question about direct evidence. Because the idea is that we're not looking for direct evidence all the time. We are looking for al-maqis alayh, something which has qiyas, and then you do something called maqis alayhi. So you have the hukum, and then you have the qiyas, and then you have the maqis alayhi. So you're seeing the reason why something is haram, and then you're applying it to other things which are not directly mentioned by the text. This is a very important principle. Any follow-ups on that?
That's all the questions. Just one person is not saying a question. I think just saying, inshallah, brother, lockdown has treated you kindly, giving talks in your bedroom instead of the amphitheater. Nonetheless, this makes it easier for you to reach out to a wider audience. Alhamdulillah, thank you for this greatly informative session. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakumullah khairan for everyone for attending this. And I really appreciate everyone's contributions.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, man. Thank you very much again. Jazakallah khair.